Ratings agency Sovereign Credit Ratings has recently released its country credit rating of Kenya. It's placed the East African nation's long-term foreign currency and local currency ratings at B and its short-term foreign currency and local currency rating at B+, with the overall outlook for the country standing at stable. Sovereign Credit Ratings is a new kid on the block that's working to rate more African countries over time. To get into the issue of credit ratings and more specifically Kenya's rating, I'm joined by Zweli Maziya. He's the Chief Operating Officer at Sovereign Credit Ratings. Thanks very much for joining us, Zweli. So just unpack for us the rating that you've arrived at for Kenya, the different ratings, and the why.
Well, just looking at the risk profile of Kenya, we actually consider a number of variables, including the debt burden as well as debt affordability. And in that, we also look at the debt structure. Looking at the way that the debt structure for Kenya is, at the moment, we note that most of the debt is actually an external debt. It's actually quite balanced, 52% of it being external debt and the rest being domestic. We also noted a few challenges, especially through 2022 into 2023, where there was a lot of debt repayments. There was a very high debt servicing cost, reaching 59%. However, this was because a lot of debt was coming due, including their Eurobond, as well as their Chinese loans. However, President William Ruto did indicate that they are focused on ensuring that Kenya does not default. And we have also noted that just looking at their foreign currency reserves, they are actually sufficient to cover them in the short term when it comes to their debt servicing costs.
I'm just juxtaposing the Kenya story to the South Africa story. I think our debt exposure, South Africa's debt exposure to foreign currency, something like 10%, and the rest we get funding internally in our local market. So you talk about Kenya having 52% exposure. That's huge, and one of the stories and themes that have been coming from the likes of the IMF and the World Bank is that developing countries who have a lot of external debt are going to be hit hard by the higher interest rate environment. So does that put the likes of Kenya in a very tricky situation going forward, even though the president says that, you know, we're going to do our best to repay, but even though they're going to grow at 6%, can they keep up based on the fact that currency fluctuations, the depreciation of local currencies might make it unaffordable to pay the interest that's owed, let alone the actual capital that's owed?
Well, just looking at the short term, we are looking at the debt servicing instead of the payment of the principal. So just looking at the foreign currency reserves that they have right now, they are quite sustainable on that front. However, you are right to say they are, more exposed when it comes to external debt than South Africa, and especially just looking at the depreciation of the Kenyan shilling against the US dollar. It's been quite extensive. I mean, currently I think it's trading at $1 to 130 Kenyan shillings. So they're definitely in a more riskier position as compared to South Africa in this case.
One of the areas that your report cites is the agricultural sector in Kenya. How significant, or in other words, let me put it a different way, what proportion of GDP does the agricultural sector represent in Kenya? And why are they so sort of susceptible in terms of the agricultural sector? And what resilience mechanisms can they put in place to try and mitigate the climate change situation?
Yeah, I think the major risk when it comes to the agricultural sector, which contributes 21.7% of their economy, it's definitely climate risk being the biggest risk. And noting just a few years ago there was a drought. However, they've been recovering from that due to significant rainfall. However, the economy in Kenya is quite complex, looking at the services industry contributing 55%, and then industrials being around 30%. So I think the most important thing that they can do is to actually reduce reliance on the agricultural sector and focus more on beneficiation when it comes to their other natural resources as well, because they do have your iron, titanium, gemstones, as well as oil and gas.
Yeah. One last question, we're running out of time. One of the issues that came up in the report as well is the embracing of public-private partnerships in the Kenyan economy, similar to what we're trying to do here in South Africa. How aggressively is the government pursuing that? And assuming that they're doing it at a faster pace than we are here in South Africa, do you expect that your rating of that country will change in the medium term?
Well, just looking at a couple of variables, they can actually impact on the rating. Of course, including the efforts when it comes to the debt consolidation, as well as this private-public partnerships. However, these are variables that we are monitoring, and it's definitely something ongoing, and it will reflect in our upcoming rating reports.
Zweli, thank you very much for your time and insights on your report. That was Zweli Maziya. He is the Chief Operating Officer at Sovereign Credit Ratings.